We've had more than 200,000 kids married in our country. It's underage girls marrying older men.
Hold on, so you're telling me that like a 35-year-old man can't have sex with a 12-year-old, but if you're married, you can?
Yes.
Oh my God. It's funny you do this show and you meet all sorts of different walks of life. And I was just thinking as you were telling this story about, unfortunately seeing someone get hit by a car, and then Chelsea Clinton picks up the phone and calls 911, and the person on the other end's like on the line with Chelsea Clinton. That must be a trip not only for them, but for you, right?
No, I just was grateful that someone answered so quickly, and it was such an affirmative moment for our city. They're like, 911 New York City dispatch, like, how can I help you? And truly within minutes, like the fire department was there, and then an ambulance was there, and the police were there, and the police called me later to take a statement. And I just felt like, oh gosh, our city really worked today. And more profoundly, just how many people stopped when we saw this happen. And the driver stopped too. And everyone was like, oh my gosh, what's happening? How do we help this person who's just gotten hurt? Like, oh wait, like looking at me, like you're already on the phone with 911. Like, we'll see, does he need water? What can we do? I mean, we are a real community in New York. And I think so often if you live outside New York City and you just watch the way we're depicted, like even in the superhero movies, it's often like quite dystopian and dark, and nobody even looks up and looks anyone in the eye, much less like asks, how are you, or can I help with anything big, like being hit by a car, unfortunately, or small, like help hold a door for you or give you a seat on the subway. But we're a real community here.
Yeah, it seems like you rally. You're selling me on New York City.
I've been trying to
Michael.
sell her on New York for
So Mike, let me know how I
years.
can help, because
I think you're helping. Keep it
love
going.
New York, and I've been lucky enough to run the New York City Marathon a couple of times, and like running through the city and just seeing all of the different neighborhoods and the different neighborhood pride and the energy, which is so out in force, like on marathon day, isn't just created on that day. It's maybe, super amplified on that day, but that's who we are. Like, we are a city of more than 8 million people, and also a city of, hundreds of different neighborhoods, but really like also a very real community.
I think that's cool. Michael, take note, put it in your notes app to convince me later.
I'm working on it. So what we like to do on this show is we both believe that our childhoods really kind of like shape a lot of who we are as adults. And I would argue that you have one of the more unique childhoods. How old were you when your father became president and you actually moved into the White House? And what was that experience like? I think it's so novel to so many people that obviously have not had that experience.
So I was 12. I was 11 when my father announced his candidacy. Way back in the 90s, people ran for president over, a year, maybe a little bit more. Now people seem to run for president over years or just perpetually for some people. But
You never know. It's a mixed bag.
Right, like way back in the 90s, like I was 11 when my dad announced in October of 1991, and then the election, was in November of the next year, 92. I was 12 when he won, and then I was 12 when we moved into the White House. And I give my parents so much credit. I mean, Michael, for your kind of asking the question around kind of trying to ensure that it was as normal as possible, while also helping me be aware of like how extraordinary a privilege and a responsibility it was, to live in the White House. A few of my friends came with me, thankfully, and were there during the inauguration. And there, the first few nights that I was kind of sleeping in this new room, in this new home that also happened to be the White House. And I think thankfully, kind of that sensibility that my parents gave me of like, this is your home. Like, you also need to be respectful because like we are living in the White House. Also, it is your home, really helped me feel like I could bring my friends over. I mean, we weren't going to be wild and crazy. We were going to be respectful, but it also was my home. They could come over for sleepovers or to watch movies or to do our homework or study for exams. And so it very much was ordinary and also extraordinary.
Before you moved into the White House, was your childhood fairly normal?
Well, my dad was governor of Arkansas. And so certainly in Arkansas, people knew who my parents were. And when we would, go out to dinner, or we'd go to church, or we'd be at like my softball or soccer games or at a ballet recital, people would come up to my parents and, share what they were thinking about what was happening in the state, offer suggestions, feedback, across the whole range of, positive to, negative or nasty. When we left Arkansas, though, when we would go on family trips to see my grandparents when I was little, who lived in Chicago, my mom's parents, or when we would take road trips, just like elsewhere in the South, or when my dad would go to governor's meetings and we'd then take a few days for a family vacation, say in like the Mountain West, no one knew who we were. So if we were in Arkansas, kind of everyone knew who we were, but if we weren't in Arkansas, kind of no one knew who we were. And that dynamic, of course, changed.
And did you like being an only child? I was going to ask you that off air because we were talking about how your husband has 11 siblings or
10. He has
10
10 siblings. He's one of 11.
Got it. So did you like being an only child?
I really wanted a sibling. I first really wanted an older brother or an older sister. I think partly, if I'm being totally honest, because I read the Sweet Valley Twins books as a child.
Oh,
And
I love those books.
And Elizabeth and Jessica have an older brother. And I was like, well, I want one of those. That seems kind of great. And then I realized that having an older brother and older sister was probably not in the cards. So then I really wanted a younger sibling. And my parents have spoken about this openly. They tried to have more children and were not able to have more children. And so I think at some point I didn't understand, the biology of that, but I got the sense that it was hard when I would ask, for my mom to have to keep having the same conversation with me. And so at some point I just thought, you know what, like I love my parents. I'm close to my parents. I have great friends. Like this is more than okay.
You do get all the attention.
I got all of the attention.
I mean,
always.
I will say it is.
Although not any longer. Now my kids get all the attention.
Now your kids get all the
Once
attention.
you have kids, the grandparents, they don't care about what happens.
No. I have
anymore.
this vivid memory of like a couple weeks after my first child, our daughter Charlotte, was born. I remembered I'd like hung up the phone. I talked to my mom, and I'm very close to my mom, but I realized like she hadn't asked a single question about me. And they're also like, when babies are 2 weeks old, your parents, like there's not much to say about them, right?
Right.
There's just like but we had talked for like, 15 minutes about this like beautiful, precious, but still kind of like blob of a person. And she hadn't once been like, so how are you? Like, are you reading anything or listening to anything while you're breastfeeding, or like, what's going on? Nothing. It was all just about it. So what more can you tell me about her? I'm like, well, she's gained a little weight.
In some ways I like it because I'm like, I got these two off my back a bit, but in the other ways I'm like, hey, I'm still here. Like, it's not just about them. Like, hello.
Yeah, your parents just pushed you to the gutter.
Listen, I might as well be a piece of paper on the wall. They can't even see me anymore.
You really fell down the leaderboard in your family.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I
it's
might
like,
be ahead of you.
sure,
too.
she's for sure ahead of me. My dad calls like, hey, how's the kids? Lauren's my favorite. Okay, gotta go. I'm like, all right, Dad. I was thinking about, our upbringing, my upbringing, and the supervision that existed there. And as you become a teenager, obviously there's parental supervision, but for you, is there like a whole nother level now where there's other people watching and you got to like, everything you're doing is being scrutinized, not only from, the people in that circle, but also the public. Like I imagine that's somewhat challenging for a young kid to navigate because you have the world watching your behavior.
I think in some ways, Michael, I was really fortunate to have grown up, as the daughter of the governor of Arkansas, because I grew up thinking like, not even thinking, just being aware in a really kind of deep cellular level, like people are always watching me, and not in a sense to be paranoid, just an awareness. And, I have memories of being a kid and people commenting on, what I was wearing or what I looked like, and remember thinking like, that's so weird. Like, why are you commenting on like what a 6 or 7-year-old is doing? I think though that really did prepare me for just the huge onslaught of attention and scrutiny, when I was living in the White House. And I admit when I first was listening to your question, I thought you were going to ask about the Secret Service.
Well, I was kind of like alluding to a little bit
and
of
it
that.
was, an odd dynamic in some ways to always have people around. But of course, if I were in a friend's home, like, they weren't in the home with me, or if we were in the White House, like they weren't, on the same floor as we were studying or talking about boys or whatever we were doing.
So it's not like they're watching right there and they're
No, and they
watching you
were
go in the bathroom. Like it's
no,
not that.
no, and many of the agents that I was really privileged, to grow up around, you were parents themselves or were kind of deeply not just I think sympathetic but empathetic to kind of this dynamic. And I always understood that they had a job to do, and I never ran away from them. I lost them once inadvertently as I was in a friend's car, and we went through a light and they didn't make it through the light and we pulled over. But even just like that brief period of time, I was like, oh no, I'm so sorry. I was like, should I get out and like walk back? And my friend was like, we're in the middle of traffic. No, like that's definitely not a
Because that,
safe
that that's
choice.
someone's job on the line, right?
Well,
Like,
also just
yeah.
like it was not purpose. Yeah, it was their job line. It was before I had a cell phone. I didn't get a cell phone until I was, gosh, I think 20. So I couldn't even like call anyone to be like, I'm so sorry. I promise I'm still here.
Pager. Was there a pager?
Oh, pager. My friends had pagers.
Yeah, we had
We had
pagers. We
You had
raised
pagers?
page-
I didn't have a
Back when you had to
pager.
get a pager and then you would have to get on the payphone.
Oh my gosh.
Not to
Yes.
date ourselves too much.
No,
here,
no, no. But
yeah.
I remember thinking my friends who had pagers were like the coolest. And there was a payphone outside our school, our high school. And I remember like after school when like everybody's pagers were going off, like the line outside the payphone to like call back whomever had paged them to like make plans. And I was like, I'm just not this cool.
In some ways, I kind of miss those days.
In high school, what is that like to go to school? Are you amongst like a bunch of different celebrities, politicians, kids, so it's not weird? Or was it is people like coming up to you and giving you their opinion?
So I went to a public school in Little Rock. I went to maybe the strangest school experience I actually had was in kindergarten, where I went to the I think there was only one, maybe there were two, but I think there was one kindergarten class in a high school because the school district had grown so much that they were like finding just spaces and places um, for particularly like the youngest kids in the district. And I remember thinking how strange it was to be like this very little kid with like all these very big people in high school. But when we moved to DC, I went to a wonderful school called Sidwell Friends, which is a private Quaker school. And I think, Lauren, the honest answer is like with the first week, there was lots of curiosity. But after that, like, in the best sense, most kids are focused on their own lives. And so people got back to their kind of, regularly scheduled programming, as it were.
It's interesting when you tell me that people were commenting on the way you look or what you're wearing when you're so young, because now that's what this generation is getting through social media, right? They can post a picture and they get all these opinions, whether you're a celebrity or in high school.
Well, but Lauren, I think like, kids these days, in many ways, their experience is far more like my experience as a kid
Right.
than like my peers' experiences were when we were kids. And I think that is because, for so many young people who are on social media, they're all effectively celebrities, right, to one another. And they're connected to not only the people they go to school with, but like their friends. And so maybe it's not the hundreds of millions of people who at some time were aware of me or watching me or had opinions on me as a kid, but it's the thousands of people that feel just as weighty, maybe even more weighty than all the people who were watching me as a child, because they can see the real-time comments. So I was aware that other people had lots of opinions about my family or even me as a kid, even though I don't think adults really should have opinions on kids, but they did. But I didn't have to see them or hear them except when someone would come up to me. And I think what's different now for kids, for adolescents is, unless they put their phone down, right, they're seeing all of these. Often people, they're only remotely like 7 degrees separated from, pontificating about what they did or espousing kind of why they think they made a mistake, or putting them down, or even giving them a compliment is still just an odd, I think, psychological dynamic for kids if it's not like your friend or your parent or your teacher or your coach.
That's kind of what I was saying, is there's a lot of parallels between what you went through and what kids are going through now. Obviously, your experience was way bigger. But if you had to give advice to someone who's listening, who maybe has a following on social media and is getting a lot of negative comments and positive comments, what would that advice be? Like, say even your child came to you and said, "I'm getting feedback." What is your advice?
I think that it is really important for all of us, whatever age, though particularly for kids and adolescents, to really know who our friends are. Like who will be there to help us celebrate our wins and to help us, mourn our losses, but also pick ourselves up and go forward. Because I think there are a lot of people in life who are there in the good times but not in the bad times. And a lot of people in life were there in the bad times, but not in the good times. And you want, or at least I want for myself, for my kids, to have friendships that are about us as whole people that can support us when we need it and celebrate us when we've earned it and are there kind of throughout kind of every experience that life brings. And I think what is hard with social media is like everything is so kind of Polaroid moment, right? It's like just a snapshot of life. And I think it's hard to build relationships over snap chats or snapshots or kind of these bite-sized moments. And so I would just urge young people to spend more time with the people they hope to be their friends and then nurturing those friendships over time. Because for me, certainly, it's always been my friends who've helped keep me grounded when I needed it, like give me hugs when I've needed them, and celebrated me when something great has happened.
You mentioned off air about you don't want to live in a bubble. Can you elaborate on what you meant?
Yeah, I don't want to live in a bubble. I want to live in this amazing city that I'm lucky enough to call home. I want to really kind of be in places when I'm lucky enough to visit them. I run outside. I run in new neighborhoods. I run at different times of the day because I love seeing the different rhythms of the city. I ride on the subway. I was about to say I walk my dog outside, but our dog just passed away.
Oh, it's the
Oh,
worst. I'm
So it
sorry.
has been a terrible
I'm so
week.
sorry. That
Thank
is,
you. And
there's nothing
and
worse.
I keep forgetting, like it almost just rolled off my tongue. I'm like, and I walk my dog in different places of like in the city. Like I would take sometimes my dog on the subway so we could go for like a walk in a different part of the city together. Um, and I don't want to live in a hermetically sealed, bubble. When I could live in New York City. Like how great
Do
is it that I get to live here?
For me, I thought that you would have come here with Secret Service. So, and for Michael's gonna make fun of me. I'm asking
I'm
a
not making
question.
fun.
I'll make myself
It's
look
okay. Your
stupid.
spouse is supposed to make fun of you,
Yeah,
right? I mean, that's like part of it.
I'll look stupid here. I didn't know. It sounds like the Secret Service stops when you're out of the White House. Is that right?
So it is different,
Like you probably can't stop for your
for
parents,
it's so
right?
it's different based on like, yeah, who you're asking the question about. So
Got it.
my parents and all former presidents and first ladies, or hopefully at some point presidents and first gentlemen, will have Secret Service forever. And I
Forever.
forever,
Yep.
like for their lives. And I so strongly support that. I think it would be a national tragedy if anything were to have happened to anyone who had served as president, even people that I vehemently disagree with. I think it is important that we provide protection to our former presidents and their spouses. Often, their spouses have similarly served, not always, but often similarly served, and certainly have been quite visible. And then, we just have to be honest about kind of what that visibility and that service often, you know, it leads to. I was about to say invites, but their
Well,
service certain invites
especially if
something, but leads
you
to.
have signed up for that for your life and your family. It's like it's basically a contract to say for the rest of my life I'm going to be a very known public person with scrutiny and attention, and not just in this country but other countries. Like I think people need to acknowledge that these
Yeah.
people are like, whether you agree, disagree, whatever side, is like they're sacrificing a significant part of their life. Yes, for obviously a very prominent office, but also like their life is forever altered, as you know.
Yes, I think this is still true, but the last time I looked at the data, thankfully overwhelmingly Americans of kind of both parties, across the country, strongly support that this is, the right thing to do to continue to, support and provide Secret Service protection to former presidents and their spouses. For children, it is somewhat situational. So for younger children, when their fathers have left the White House, Secret Service protection, sometimes has continued for longer duration. For much older children, it generally ends as soon as the next president is inaugurated. For me, I had Secret Service through just past my graduation from Stanford because I was so associated with Stanford and so well known, and I had had a number of different characters show up at different times to Stanford campus looking for me,
Wow.
and so that um, kind of led the Secret Service, and thankfully something that President Bush supported to extend my Secret Service, which I very much have always had this view of like whatever the Secret Service thinks, like they're the experts. Like it
Yeah.
is not for me to candidly really have an opinion here. It's for me to listen to them when they, tell me or tell our family kind of what they're concerned about or hopefully what they're not concerned about.
If you are looking for a multivitamin, I have you covered. I have been taking the most incredible multivitamin for the last like 3 years, and that is Ritual Vitamin. They have this specific one. It's the essential for women 18 plus. It is the best women's vitamin. First of all, every single thing in it is traceable. So you can go on their site and see where every single ingredient comes from. It's soy free, gluten free, vegan friendly, and formulated without GMOs. It would like blow your mind to know how many vitamins are actually formulated with GMOs. So this is a big one. And this is such a detail. It has like a minty essence in every bottle. So instead of having this nasty, disgusting, fishy, chalky vitamin, Ritual has this minty essence that's soft and feminine and lovely and amazing. And it just makes taking a multivitamin enjoyable. I don't like dread taking my multivitamin anymore. Ritual comes in an aesthetically pleasing vitamin holder. I have it on my vanity. Makes it so easy to just do it in the morning and be done with it. It fills in the key nutrient gaps to support your foundational health. And if you're looking to get pregnant or you're postpartum, they have a vitamin for every single stage. I am such a fan. So instead of striving for perfect health, aim for supporting foundational health. Great news, Ritual is offering all of our listeners 10% off during their first 3 months. You're going to visit ritual.com/skinny to start Ritual or add Essential for Women 18 plus to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/skinny.
The internet has enabled a lot of wild things. It's also enabled a ton of incredible things. One of those incredible things is a platform called ZocDoc. ZocDoc is the only free app that lets you find and book doctors who are patient reviewed, take your insurance, and are available when you need them and treat almost every condition under the sun, all curated just for you under one platform. It is the most convenient way to find a doctor that is right for you. Long gone are the days if you're living in a town and you're looking around and all of a sudden you just find the closest guy and that's your doctor for life. You can actually take the time through this app to vet doctors that you trust, lessening the burden of feeling like you're stuck in a box. When you're not feeling your best and you're just trying to hold it together, finding great care shouldn't take up all your energy. That's where ZocDoc comes in. Using their free app that millions of users rely on, you can find the right doctor that meets your needs. It enables us to have choice when we're making one of the most important decisions in our lives, which is the doctor that's going to help take care of us. When Lauren and I moved to Texas, we had to start all over. We had none of our people. We had to figure out all of these different things. And ZocDoc is such an incredible app to do that. With ZocDoc, there are no alarms and no surprises. You can choose from thousands of patient-reviewed doctors and specialists, browse doctor profiles, upload and verify your insurance information, and get the care you need. So if you're in the market for a new doctor or just seeking some different kind of medical care or just want to vet your options, make sure you go to ZocDoc.com/skinny and download the ZocDoc app for free. Then find and book top-rated doctors today. Many are available within 24 hours. That's ZocDoc.com/skinny, ZocDoc.com/skinny.
When you say characters, do you mean people stalking you, like trying to date you, people coming to give their opinion,
Oh
people
gosh, all
dangerous?
sorts of things, like people showing up to give me things, people showing up to share their opinions, people, White Plaza is kind of the big central area of Stanford. I remember there was this one gentleman who would truly come with like an old fashioned crate, like soapbox, and like stand on it and, shout all sorts of things at me. And so just different characters.
Do you just ignore it?
Generally,
Yeah, that's what I would just act like it's not there.
generally the people that are, um, are nice and want to um, share even their opinions, but often stories about a time they met one of my parents or how the Family Medical Leave Act changed their lives, or um, my father kind of leading NATO's effort to help protect Kosovar Albanians, like saved their family and enabled them to, immigrate to the United States, or how my mom's work on kind of protecting and elevating women's voices around the world, inspired them to become a playwright in Japan. I mean, like all sorts of stories have been shared with me over, the course of my life, and those I always want to hear and want to listen to. But when people, are just, you know, wanting to talk to me because they want to say something like mean or nasty, or when people say, actually quite horrific things, I try to have a spidey sense, as my husband would call it, to hopefully avoid those conversations in the first place if possible, or to just extract myself as quickly as I can.
You almost have to like dissociate from it and just act like it's not like in your ether.
Yeah. Or when people, say things to me like, oh, like, don't you wish your mother would have aborted you? And I'm like, no, I
Oh
Oh
don't.
my
my
God.
Right.
gosh.
Or
Jesus
like,
Christ.
Are people say that to your
oh,
face?
sure. Or like, you should have died in Benghazi. I'm like, actually, the tragedy is that anyone died in Benghazi. Or, I hope that your children die so that like your family's evil like isn't perpetuated. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I hope my children all live to be 100 and have healthy,
Wow.
happy, thriving lives. Because like, what do you say when people say things to you like that? You're like, oh, I'm so sorry you have that much like pain and anger inside you, but I'm not gonna dwell in that. And if you're standing right in front of me, I can't quite ignore you. So I'm just gonna actually share what I authentically feel, which is like, I don't agree with that. And like, have a nice day.
It is projection.
Oh,
It's
completely.
projection.
Yeah. And I think this actually goes back in some ways to the earlier conversation, in that I actually think as perverse and absurd and even bonkers as it sounds, that I was lucky as a kid to have to navigate this stuff, because as a kid it was thankfully easy for me to think like, why are these adults saying these like wackadoodle things to me as a kid? Like, this is just so wacky. Like, why do you think you can have an opinion on like my hairstyle when
Because
I'm
to,
like
to your point, that
eight or
didn't happen
whatever?
to I guess civilians. That does not happen. Like I don't remember any of my parents' friends or any parental
Some of them
stranger.
might have thought it, Michael.
Yeah, I mean,
Hate to
listen,
break it
who
to you.
knows? But but we didn't deal with that level of scrutiny or criticism as a child, and also without the context of like, I mean, I'm sure you were aware of some of the things going on, but you're sitting there as a child being like, what is all this?
Yeah, no. And when my dad ran, and then after he was inaugurated, Rush Limbaugh and others, but notably Rush Limbaugh, and I think this is now, somewhat somewhat well known, like was quite vicious to me, and said terrible things about like my parents, and called me the White House dog repeatedly.
And how old were you at this
I
point?
was 12, 13.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, this is just so at best odd and at worst just wrong. Like, why is this old man like obsessed with me? Like, this is so weird and creepy
And do
and
you have
inappropriate.
I guess like you go to your parents for this, and like, are they giving you the context and like trying to explain like,
I mean, my parents were just like furious and wanted to protect me.
sure,
And I think thankfully, my friends like had no idea who Rush Limbaugh was, so I had to try to
yeah,
explain who he
13
was.
year old girls aren't
Right?
listening to Rush
they're
Limbaugh.
not.
Okay.
They're not listening to Rush
Yeah,
Limbaugh.
yeah.
And then thankfully, like there was no, like there was no dissonance in opinion. Everyone was like, "That's weird.
Yeah.
Like that's just so
Like it
weird."
doesn't play on any political spectrum. It's
No,
like,
right?
yeah,
You're like, that's just weird.
When you're making friends at any age and you're you, do you feel like you have a guard up and you're able to open up easy? Or do you feel like you have a guard up, or are you able to open up easy? And what is that like? Like you mentioned a spidey sense. Do you have that about friends?
I do. I of course haven't always been right. There's, I think, for me, like for any of us, there are a couple of people I've trusted that I certainly wish that I hadn't.
Right.
But overall, thankfully, I have very good friends from every phase of life, and I don't want to live behind walls. And I have truly friends from, like the parents of my kids' friends who are now good friends that I've only met in the last few years, to my oldest friend in the world whose mother was with my mother in Lamaze class.
Wow.
And she's 6 weeks
Cool.
older than I am. We've been friends, my entire life. And so I think, Lauren, like I don't want to live behind walls. I don't owe myself up to everyone I meet, because who does?
Sure.
But even last night I was at a um reception for my son's 3-year-old class, and one of the moms is quite pregnant and has been told that she might have to have a C-section. And she didn't have a C-section with her first. She was like, I don't know anyone that's had a C-section. I was like, I had a C-section. Like, what do you want to know? Truly, I'm like, what do you want to know? Like, there shouldn't be like stigma or shadows around something as fundamental as like bringing a child into the world, and whatever the kind of healthy way to do that is. Like, we don't know each other that well, but like our kids really like each other. Like, we have this like circle of trust and community because we've now been in the same preschool class for the last couple of years. I'm like, what? I like. She's like, really? I was like, yeah. What do you want to know?
I have a question in a different realm. When you have parents that are this accomplished in life and you're the child and you're looking at that as an example, I think for many children that have accomplished parents, it can be extremely overwhelming. You're overwhelming. You yourself have done so many different things. You've gone to great schools, you're an author, you've been part of charities. Like, how do you find the drive, and how did you think about kind of stepping out of what I would say is that shadow in order to find kind of your own identity and your own success?
I think, Michael, in some ways, again, since I know you're both so interested in how our childhoods have shaped us, I think that's even how you started the conversation. I think, again, I am lucky in some ways, because some of my earliest memories are people asking me like, so are you going to grow up and like run for governor of Arkansas one day? Or like, do you want to go into politics? And I remember being like, 3, 4, or 5 and being like, "Oh, I don't think so. Maybe, who knows? I'm like, I haven't even gone to kindergarten yet. I don't know how to read. Like, I don't know.
I thought I was gonna be like an astronaut or like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
superhero.
So I
So
thankfully had many dreams as a kid. Like, I was interested in being like an aerospace engineer for a while because I was obsessed with satellites, or I wanted to be a research scientist because I wanted to understand cancer, or I wanted to be a teacher because I loved my teachers. I had great teachers as a kid. I'm still in touch with my first grade teacher. Like, shout out to Mrs. Mitchell if you're listening right now. Like,
big listener.
yeah, Dr. Mitchell. She's not. I should get Dr. Mitchell. She got her PhD later in life. And so I think, thankfully, I had many different dreams as a kid. I never felt like um, I had to go into politics, or that only through politics could one make a difference. Although, of course, I think like who runs for office and hold office has a enormous importance and kind of everything I do care about. And so then when I decided I might want to be a doctor, and then I realized, no, I was more interested in public health, and I was more interested in kind of health systems and trying to work, in nonprofits or as an advocate. It just felt great. Like, I was like, my parents just want me to always work as hard as I can. Like, what I was aware of as a kid, Michael, was like, if I, got a B in a subject that my parents knew I could have gotten an A in, like, that's what disappointed them. Where they're like, you didn't work hard enough. You weren't focused enough. You weren't sufficiently curious to ask the questions to help you learn what you needed to learn to be able to get that A.
Who's more strict?
Oh, my mom, for sure.
Your mom.
For sure.
So your dad's more laid back.
For sure.
I feel like as a grandpa too, I could see him just being like really laid back and cool and chill.
I also loathe ever like having to candidly like recognize gender dynamics, but I see this in I don't know what it's like in your house, but like in my house, in so many of my friends' homes, where it's the mom who's like, all right, no, we do have to go to bed. It's bedtime now. And the kids like look at their dad and they're like, 4 more stories. And he's like, okay, 3 more stories. I'm like, that's not a compromise. What? No, my kid's bedtime. They need to brush their teeth. They need to go to bed.
Well,
But
especially with little girl, and again, not getting into
I
gender
think
dynamics.
I would say that you're more like that than me.
Well, like, the thing is, and this I will like, I can do no wrong in my 3-year-old daughter's eyes, where like she will get sassy with her, right? And I think that
yeah, the girl dad thing, it's real.
it's real.
It's
Yeah,
real.
and
I'm
she
now
gets
aware of it,
frustrated.
like reflecting back on my
Mhm.
childhood with my parents. And I am, again, like really close with both my parents. But I see it also with my daughter and my husband. And then I see, admittedly, how like my sons like ride in her wake.
Mhm.
because like it's so hard for Mark to say no to Charlotte, and then Aiden and Jasper are like, well, I'm getting on that train. I'm getting on that train to stay up a little bit later.
It is true about sons and moms, though.
That is true too.
My son looks at me like I'm the best thing to ever happen on the planet Earth.
No, that's you are. So you never felt compelled to kind of walk the same path. I mean, because I think like I always go back and forth on this. You know, you hear stories of people that struggle and come up, the hard way and under difficult circumstances, and they have this kind of drive to kind of like pull themselves up and really go far in life. And then on the flip side is sometimes you hear about kids that grew up with like either maybe a little more privileged or more accomplished parents, and they really struggle because they're following in such huge footsteps. You never kind of felt that pressure.
I felt enormous pressure to, again, work hard. And I felt enormous pressure to like make a contribution to the world. I think um, I'm sure there are things that I could have chosen to do with my life that my parents would have, you know, loved me no less for, but would have kind of raised their eyebrows at. But I think because in my 20s, I was so focused on just trying to get like bluntly smarter. I worked in consulting. I then worked in finance. I then got my PhD. And so then, like in my 30s, when I was really oriented on, here's the nonprofit work I want to do. Here's how I want to redirect the inevitable attention that comes my way into highlighting people and organizations that I think are really important. Like I am going to be an active citizen. I campaigned for my mom. I campaigned for President Obama. I've campaigned now for lots of people. And so I think, Michael, thankfully, um, for me, I probably was always going to wind up here of trying to think like, how many different ways can I make a difference with the privilege I absolutely have, also with the education and the experience that I've earned, and how can I be in service to others? But I never felt like the answer to that question had to look like what my parents have chosen to do.
What I love about living in this modern age, and I say this all the time, it has never been easier to make a living online, to get discovered, to share your ideas, to connect with people. And one of the best ways to do that is on Squarespace. Squarespace is your one-stop shop to build your online presence, to build your online store, your blog, your newsletter, your analytics, all in one place. Something that you own. Anything you put on the Squarespace platform is completely yours. You own 100% of it. Unlike these third-party platforms, where we're really at the mercy of these platforms and we really don't own anything, Squarespace enables you to create your own presence online and own everything. It's also extremely cost-effective. It's fast. It's efficient. For those of you that have not been alive as long as I have, and I'm sure there's many of you out there, you don't realize how hard it used to be to build websites. With Squarespace, you can build beautiful world-class websites all in one place, and you would never know it was done on a single platform like this. I don't think people realize, especially creators, how important it is to have your own footprint online that you fully control and own. In addition to all these features I've mentioned, you can also build email campaigns, you can collect donations, there's social sharing, analytics. It is your one-stop shop to build the most beautiful website, beautiful presence, most functional application online that you, again, fully control. So check it out today. Head to squarespace.com/skinny for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use offer code SKINNY to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. Again, that is squarespace.com/skinny. Offer code SKINNY for 10% off. Enjoy.
We went on a 2-week vacation and we had to send our dogs off to my godparents' house, and we sent them with air dried dog food. It's called Sundays. Sundays has a short list of human grade ingredients, so they're eating the healthiest dry food. So if you're looking for a really incredible air dried dog food, Sundays is for you. You're going to notice a lot of health improvements too right away. Softer fur, fresher breath, better poops, and more energy. Our dogs love it. They eat it up the second they get it. It is the best air dried dog food. And unlike other fresh dog food, Sundays is zero prep, zero mess, and zero stress, which is why it's also so great to travel with. It's shelf stable, which makes it easy to feed your pups top quality food. But the best part is every order ships right to your door, so you never have to worry about running out of dog food again. You should also know Sundays cost 40% less than any other healthy dog food brand because Sundays doesn't waste money shipping frozen packages. Instead, they spend on what matters, sourcing the best all-natural ingredients for your pup. And we have a very special deal. We worked out this amazing deal for all our dog-loving listeners. You get 35% off your first order of Sundays. Go to sundaysfordogs.com/skinny or use code skinny at checkout. That's sundaysfordogs.com/skinny. Upgrade your pup to Sundays and feel good about the food you feed your dog. I am not one who likes to wash my hair. In fact, once a week, if we're lucky over here. So I take dry shampoo very, very seriously. And the dry shampoo that I use is by a brand called Living Proof. Here's the thing. It works like a shampoo, but it also has a leave-in conditioner in it. So your hair feels silky and shiny and smooth, as opposed to that like really dry, chalky feel that a lot of dry shampoos feel like. I shake it up and then I spray it right on my roots. And then I'll wait 30 seconds and I'll just shake my hair out. You just really don't have to wash your hair all the time, is what I've realized. And then I'll just brush it back into like a tight bun, or I'll put it up in a claw clip. But the point is, you need a good dry shampoo. And you need one that doesn't leave white residue behind and takes care of your scalp. Living Proof always formulates without silicones, harsh sulfates, or parabens. This is one of the reasons why I use it. It's also PETA certified, cruelty-free, color safe, and safe for chemically treated hair. Visit livingproof.com/skinny and use code skinny to get a free travel size dry shampoo with your purchase of $45 or more. That's livingproof.com/skinny, code skinny to get a free travel size dry shampoo. That's livingproof.com/skinny, code skinny to get a free travel size dry shampoo with your purchase of $45 or more. livingproof.com/skinny, code skinny.
What was the difference between when your father was running and your mother was running? Obviously, you were older and campaigning, but what
Seems
were
like the when your mother was running, there was a little bit more contention in the country, a little bit more. It was
Well, there's
maybe
social media.
maybe not as a
Well,
polite political spectrum.
I do think, Lauren, it's probably not like the sexiest answer, but I think the biggest and like difference really was just my age. Like I
Yeah.
was
Uh-huh.
I was in 7th grade when my
Different.
Yeah, you're a kid.
I was a kid, right? And when my mom ran for the first time, I was like 28 and applying to PhD programs, right? It was like
Yeah.
it's like a very different just like I was at a wildly different place in life.
Do you like campaigning? It seems like a lot of work.
I love campaigning because since I'm a terrible actress, like I don't campaign for candidates or causes that I don't like deeply, passionately believe in. And I love, sharing why I so strongly support, my mom, or why I so strongly support ending child marriage, which is one of the causes I am determined that we will see through in my
Ending
lifetime.
child marriage, like under 18
Oh
getting
yes,
married?
child marriage is legal in 43 states in the United States.
How young?
So in some states, there's actually no age limit. But we most
What?
recently got
Wait, since-
child
is
marriage
this
banned
always?
in Massachusetts, and it was effectively 12 was the minimum age.
How is this not like? I mean, I guess you're talking about, but how is this not a more
It's-
known issue?
It's, I think, because it makes people really uncomfortable.
Yes.
It makes people really uncomfortable. I mean,
Why does that law
since
even exist?
So since 2000, we've had more than 200,000 kids married in our country. And this is often framed by the people who don't think the law should change. It's like, well, most of them are 16 and 17-year-olds. And I'm like, but 16 and 17-year-olds should not be getting married. Like they should be in school. And overwhelmingly, it's girls who are effectively being trafficked into marriage, either by their parents for religious reasons or cultural reasons, or their daughter got pregnant and they don't think
Or
that-
maybe money.
sometimes money, sometimes immigration. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons.
And I imagine this is what you're depicting is not like a 16-year-old marrying a 16-year-old sweetheart.
Every once in a while, but frequently not. More frequently, it's underage girls marrying older men.
Hold on. So you're telling me that you can't have, like, a 35-year-old man can't have sex with a 12-year-old, let's say,
Unless you're married.
legally.
Unless you're married.
But if you're married, you can.
Yes.
Oh my God.
And
That doesn't make
and
any
Lauren-
sense.
And so,
So, okay, but-
and part of what's so pernicious about this is if you're, say you're 16, you get married, you realize you don't want to be married, or you, and more often is the case, like you are being abused, and you leave your home. most shelters won't take you because you're not old enough to be in an adult shelter where you have to be over 18, and you're considered a runaway. Um, and so most family shelters won't take you. So you get reported to social services or the police or both, and often taken back to your abusive household, or taken back to your parents, who then take you often back to your abusive household. You also can't enter into a contract um, under 18, so you can't legally hire a lawyer to help try to extract you from
I don't
this
get how some of
marriage.
these things are
Yes.
even possible.
So until like less than a decade ago, child marriage was legal in every state. And now, thankfully, due to this amazing woman, Frady Rice, who I just think the world of and would like run through fire for her, because she was forced into marriage. She got herself out, and now she's dedicated her life to ending child marriage across the United States.
So
So in-
essentially, a 35-year-old can sleep with a 12-year-old if they're married.
Yes,
So
in
if
some
you're-
states. In some states, the minimum age is 15. In some states, it's 16. You often, in many states, you do often have to have the parents' consent and a local judge consent. But often the local judges are from the same culture, the same kind of religious group, the same kind of zeitgeist as the parents. And so often, very rarely do judges turn down an application for a child marriage.
If someone's listening and they want to support this, because I'm sure a lot of people are passionate about what you're talking about,
And
to help-
surprised, like
I think
I'm-
this
I'm
is
shocked.
We've done almost 600 of
I'm
these.
shocked
This is the
what you're
first,
saying.
and I try to consider myself somewhat well read and
Yes.
aware of what's going on in the world. I think this is the first time I've ever heard of this depicted this way, and it's the very first time we've ever talked about on the show. So I think a lot of people like myself are like, "Whoa!"
So Unchained at Last, started by Frady Rice, is like the leading organization going state by state, because marriage is a state authority here, like under the Constitution. It's not a federal authority; it's a state authority, going state by state. And I do want to give credit to the media broadly, because while this, I think, so often has been ignored because it is shameful and people are uncomfortable with collective shame, certainly, is that even like earlier this week, I saw a story on CNN about a woman who'd been married at 13 in Florida, and like married because she'd been groomed, and it seems as if probably this older man had paid her parents for her. She had like 2 children by the time she was 16, and then she escaped, and now also is trying to raise awareness about the kind of human rights violation that child marriage is. And so I hope that this is becoming more well known, because I think hopefully the more we bring this out of the shadows, the more girls and women in particular whose lives we can quite literally save.
I think one of the frustrating things for many civilians in this country is that, like, to me, I hear this, I'm like, this is a real issue. This is serious. This is affecting kids. And we get distracted by so many things that are not as consequential, or maybe don't have as much of an impact on, the citizens of this country, right? It's like, and not to point blame on it, but I think you look at something like this and this is shameful and everyone knows, and most people listening are like, hey, this is effed up. But then we get distracted by some headline about like what's going on in the banking sector, or what's going on, with this celebrity or this. And I imagine for someone like you that's trying to bring awareness, that's got to be somewhat frustrating, because this is an issue everybody should be paying attention to.
Yeah, and it also, you asked earlier about like how divided we are. Truly, like, this is an issue where we have some incredible, supporters and champions who are quite on the right, and some who are, quite on the left.
Sure.
I did an event last year with a very Republican.
This is not about a fiscal policy. This is about kids.
Like a very like conservative Republican state senator from South Carolina, and someone who's a democratic socialist, like here in New York State. And these 2 women could not have been clearer. Like, if we can't come together on this issue, like, what hope do we have? And also, how can we not come together on this issue to try to help protect girls everywhere, whether they're going to grow up and be one political party or the other, or even political at all. Like, everyone deserves the chance to be a kid and not a bride.
Yeah, and not to, I mean, we typically don't get so into politics here just because we're not the best people
Yeah.
to speak to it. But I feel
But this
like,
shouldn't be political.
no, sure. But I also feel like let's talk about your father and Bush and Obama. I feel like there is a shared kind of respect and camaraderie and willing to kind of come to the table and work together. And I feel like what I think concerns a lot of people now is we're getting further away from that. Like your father and Bush may disagree on certain policies, but there's a mutual understanding that they're working together to, enhance the same country. And I feel like we're getting to a place where that's getting further and further apart.
I think that you know, Michael, I share those concerns, and certainly, I think about my father and President Bush, who actually work together now year round through something called the Presidential Leadership Scholars Program, where they bring people
Yeah, they seem like
who
they're buddies.
yeah, they're friends, and my father had a very warm, deep relationship with President Bush's father, President Bush Sr., and they do a lot of work not only with President Obama, but many of the kind of presidential libraries for people who are no longer with us, but who steward those legacies, whether for President Johnson or President Ford. And I think what has shifted now, I mean, we've always had um, nasty people who have platforms in politics or kind of in media or kind of in culture that are kind of you know weighing in on and trying to shape political discourse and debate. I do think, though, what is different about social media is that the extremes are so often the most rewarded by the algorithms, which then put kind of that content and those voices higher up in people's feed. And so people then get acculturated to kind of that anger and that venom and that vitriol. And I am very concerned about that because, I do think about, um, that great, quote from President John Adams that we're all entitled to our own opinions, but not our own set of facts. Which then the great Daniel Patrick Moynihan here in New York, our senator, over decades here, really spoke a lot about and always tried to help, not only his colleagues but kind of the public understand like here's what is actually true, and then here are all the things that you can have different opinions on. And I think we've lost that. We've lost that partly because the social media companies, but also many of the people who are newly in politics don't want us to gain it back because they have built kind of enormous profits or kind of profitable careers off of kind of being able to optimize around the algorithms.
You know what I think, just as I'm not I don't know a ton about politics, but this is just seeing the whole picture. I think more people like you and politicians need to come on outlets similar to this, like podcasts, where it's just a conversation and it's not so politically charged. It's like I'm scared to turn on the news because everyone has an agenda, but if you just listen to people talk in a neutral atmosphere like this, and when I hear what you're telling me about child brides in a way that's like this, it's so much more digestible than than some of these outlets screaming extremes.
Well, because
I
you
think
can
if more politicians came on, like, and I'm not saying this podcast, I'm just saying it was
No, I
more,
think
it
you're
was
right.
different
Yeah,
atmosphere
I think you're right.
it's
well,
for me, this is like, this is making sense to me very easily, as opposed to being yelled at or screamed at or trolls on social media or even Fox News, CNN, whatever it is. It's become too much.
we're taking very complex issues that require real thought and dialogue and condensing them down into a 5-minute bite or 180 characters and then letting people form their opinion off of whatever that bite looks like, right? Like there's things you could pull out of this, hour or so long conversation that would be 30 seconds that could maybe completely actually warp what you're actually saying. Right. And I think why we're attracted to this is we've had all sorts of different people, different backgrounds, different beliefs, really, whatever. And at the end of the day, people are people. And I believe the majority of people have good intentions and are just trying to do their best in life. Of course, you have some bad actors here and there. But Lauren and I really try to bring this audience along to understand why someone comes to the beliefs that they come to or why they have the perspective. Like nobody,
It gives context.
yeah, and I think, people may read a headline Chelsea Clinton on the show and they're immediately going to be having a bias just from your name in a title, right? They're going to come and think, "Oh, she only thinks this certain way. This is, I can predict everything she's going to say." I really think it's important for people in any media landscape to try to, really share a greater picture and a greater understanding and a greater perspective because it helps people be like, "Oh, okay, like I get that. Maybe I disagree with this a little bit, but like I understand the perspective and I can
Yeah.
respect
And
it.
you're right that the issue that you just brought up isn't political. So why
No.
can't you have just a conversation like this?
Well, and I think, Michael, what you're saying too, I so agree with that. Yes, I do believe um, there are bad actors who are trying to do bad things. I also so fundamentally that most people, most Americans are decent, good people who want to do the right thing, who want to be, supporting kind of good things to happen and to stop bad things from happening. And I do like so deeply believe that's true. I also though think about one of your earlier comments around how um, how the stories are always shifting. So Lauren, to your point, like they're so explosive, they're often being treated with like everything is treated as like existential. And whatever that existential thing is shifting every day. And so then it I think also is hard for people to understand kind of the long haul issues like tackling child marriage or the long haul issues also like tackling climate change, whatever it is you think we all should do. And everyone I know has different views about what we should do, but it's hard to hold those threads together when you're like, oh my gosh, now I'm worried about kind of this financial issue, or now I'm worried about this thing in my neighborhood, or now I'm worried about something happening around the world, or now I'm worried about um, what type of stove I have in my apartment or my home. Like I get why it's hard to hold that attention that we need to hold
It's
for
a lot of
these
content.
for these longer haul issues that do deserve our attention.
You wrote a book. You wrote a lot of books.
I have written a lot of books. Yes.
Tell us about why you decided to do this and who needs these books. I'm going to give them to my kids.
Oh gosh,
I'm
thank
going
you.
to read
Lauren.
them a bedtime story.
So I see on top we actually have the Welcome to the Big Kids Club, which hopefully will be great for your 3-year-old. It's something I wrote really in response to the questions that Charlotte and Aiden were asking when I was pregnant with, and then after their baby brother Jasper arrived in the world.
Give us an example of a question.
Like, why do babies poop so much?
Oh,
Right? Or when will my baby talk to me? And like
Okay.
actually there's a whole
Cute.
range of times, right? Or like why does my baby need to burp? Like I don't need to burp. Like why does my baby need to burp? And I framed it as my baby because that's how Charlotte really spoke about Jasper, which I was really struck by. And initially I was like, it's my baby. Like you didn't give birth to this baby. But then I thought, how wonderful and loving is that
it's
she
really loving because Zaza doesn't look at my son. That's really loving
Well,
of Charlotte.
like-
Charlotte sounds really.
She just started giving him a little
Yeah.
finger touch at month 8. So
Okay,
Yeah,
all right,
just a finger touch. So
well,
that's really
we
nice.
all start
that
somewhere.
Charlotte
So
sounds
we all
very
start
sweet.
somewhere. But all of my books have stories, that are candidly like out of my experience in some ways. Like I wrote Don't Let Them Disappear, which I see down there because we were talking about what we wanted to be when we grew up, when we were little. And while I never kind of saw myself as the next Jane Goodall, maybe because I was just so in awe of her as a kid and still am as an adult, I've always loved animals. Like I've always wanted to know as much as I can about the animals that I feel connected to: elephants, giraffes, dogs. Like I've loved learning about them. I've loved being able to be around them and being around lots of kids, my nieces and nephews. I have 20 nieces and nephews and their friends, and like my kids and their friends. I realized how, I'm sure not totally universal, but fairly universal it is for kids to love animals and to want to know more about them, whether their own pets or animals around the world. So I wrote Don't Let Them Disappear to help kids know that some of these animals are really in danger, but they can help save them.
Really cute. And she persisted.
Yes, she persisted. Thank you, Lauren. Is now a series really about first women who inspired me. So the first books are very personal. And now is a chapter book series where I've been really lucky to work with dozens of women authors and illustrators as they're telling stories of women who inspire them for young readers. Because still the vast majority of books published any given year, picture book or chapter books, have main characters that are boys. And while that's important, look at you, Michael, we need to do a better job of telling more stories about women, by women, and for girls and boys.
Where can everyone find your books, support you? Do you have an Instagram account?
I don't have an Instagram account. I'm happy to talk about why I don't have an Instagram account if that's interesting to you.
I would love to know.
Yes. So my kids are the most important part of my life. And I do not show their images on social media. And I
don't blame
actually
you.
try really hard to protect them. And we go through lots of links to protect them at their schools and kind of other places where they do activities so that their images hopefully don't show up on social media. Because while I do believe overwhelmingly people are good and want good for all kids everywhere, I also know that there's some people who really hate my family, including the youngest members of it. And so that is important to us. And it would just feel disingenuous to me. And Lauren, I may make a different choice at some point, and all the people I work with would of course love for me to make a different choice. But for me right now, it just would feel disingenuous to have like a visual look into things that I care about and find compelling, and to not include the most important part of my life that I care about and find compelling, which are my kids.
That
don't
makes
think
total sense.
Yeah, I don't think any parent listening would fault you, especially you, for that decision,
Yeah.
right? Like that makes complete sense to
So
me.
how do we support what you're doing and find everything?
So thank you. So I do, I have a Twitter account and a Facebook account because those are generally words.
Okay.
And you can always find out kind of substantively what we're up to through the Clinton Foundation. And for my books, you can find them hopefully in your local bookstore, but certainly I have a wonderful long partnership with Barnes and Noble, and so my books are thankfully always there, and on Amazon and wherever you get your books.
We will link your books. I can't wait to read these to my kids. Chelsea, thank you so much for coming on. I have to say, you're such a breath of fresh air. And I want to say this because I think it's important. You didn't come with like all these things we couldn't talk about. You were an open book.
No.
Oh, there's a
That's-
red dot on my shirt. No, just kidding.
No.
It's refreshing.
No. Yeah.
So thank you very much for coming
Yeah.
on.
Lauren and
you,
Michael, thank
Chelsea.
you so much for
Great.
having me.
Thanks. That was amazing.